This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. This episode, we're speaking to journalist Daphne Wesdorp. She's going to be talking to us about her time spent living in the jungles of Myanmar with the anti-junta rebels. She spent a considerable amount of time with them in their camps, on the front lines, and also in one of their 3D printed workshops, which was hidden in a cave. Really interesting situation. Her reporting on this is excellent. She's got some great insights into how the rebels are doing out there in Myanmar at the moment. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, please support us at patreon.com/popularfront. So recently, you've been in Myanmar, you're in the jungles, taking photos, reporting with the rebels. Tell us about that. Why did you decide to go out there? It's obviously a very risky situation. I know when you were out there was airstrikes in the jungle, all sorts of shit. Tell us about that. Why did you decide to go all the way there? Because at the time, everybody was very focused on Ukraine.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because I worked in Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Up until a couple months ago, actually. But I wanted to go to Myanmar for a long time. And right now, because of the ongoing operation, it's a bit more in the news. But before, when Ukraine was kicking off, and that was the new thing in the media that was dominating, it was a bit right, you have this civil war in Myanmar. Nobody gives a fuck about it. While if you look at the atrocities and the crimes against humanity that they're committing there, I don't know. It was just nobody cared, and I wanted to go there. I just wanted to be on the ground. I wanted to see what was happening, and I felt if nobody's gonna do it, then I'm gonna do it. I know there was some journalists that actually went there, but it was still, especially in Dutch media, because I write for them. It was almost no one. Yeah. So I felt especially after Ukraine, that was the next step for me.
Yeah, it's a really weird conflict. It's so interesting, and there's so much going on. But like you said, it just, even in English speaking media, okay, yeah, it gets mentioned now and then, but it's nothing compared to, for example, Ukraine or Israel Palestine right now. And it's simple to say, oh, well, it's not the same caliber, it's not the same size. Well, maybe for you it's not, but for the people around there and in that region it is. It's a whole rebel force fighting this brutal junta in a massive country. Tell us, how did you actually get there? What was the situation like? I understand it's pretty hard to get in.
Yeah, so it was actually funny, because I spoke with other journalists that have crossed the border, and the area that I wanted to go to was on the eastern side, so I went to Karenni State. And before I went there, the only way to get over the border was to walk for 3 days through the jungle. So when I was going there, I was right, that's what I have to do. So I kind of prepared for that. I came with my walking boots. I actually trained even before that, because you have to have a good condition, to walk for 3 days through the mountains, through the jungles. But when I got there, I was speaking to my friend who was going to help me over the border, and I was calling him, and I was right, I'm ready. Brought my hiking boots and whatever, and he was laughing. He was saying no, it's way too warm. We're not going to do that. We're just going to take the car. So that was that was very good for me, because before the road is really brutal, because it's not just a danger, because obviously these places are mined through the jungle. There's not there's not a path, right? It's really hiking through the forest. There's mines. There's even some military bases you have to pass. The rebel groups, they have to pick you up, so they have to walk first 2 days to the border, pick you up, and then walk 2 days back. So it's a drag for everyone. Then we went by car, and it was possible because back then it was June, and right before the rebel groups in Karenni State, the rebel groups over there, they managed to take some critical infrastructure, and it's not really taking it because the roads over there, they're often used by both the Burmese military and the rebel groups. But before I got there, they managed to take some control over the roads, so it was actually possible to go by car. So we went by car. We got into this small village on the other side. I stayed there for a couple of days with the Karenni army, which is an ethnic armed group that is fighting for decennia long in that area. And after that, we went to Demoso, which is it's like 12 hours by pickup truck through the jungles, through the bamboo forest, like over the mountains. Incredibly difficult area to get around in, because especially as the winter is coming, not the winter, but the rain season, the roads are flooded. There's mud everywhere. People get stuck. So yeah, it was 12 hours drive to Demoso, which was the town next to Loikar, which is the biggest city in Karenni State. But yeah, so finally after like 2 days of travel, we got there. And I stayed at the base of the Karenni army first for the first night. And then the day after, I went to the base of the KNDF, the Karenni Nationalities Defense Force. And I stayed there for 3 weeks, I think.
Well, so even though you didn't have to hike through, that's still like pretty mad journey.
It was a mad journey, yeah. And it's beautiful out there. It's a bit like... It's very poor. Like you can see the difference, because the moment you cross the border, you see the refugee camps. I think after the coup, there has been about, let me think, I think 350,000 people that have been displaced, and they often go as close as they can to the border areas because there's less airstrikes there. So yeah, the moment you enter, you come into these refugees camps, which are made of from bamboo huts, basically. So yeah, it was a mad road, and as I was saying, like the rainy season was about to come, so the roads were already muddy. There was some sort of traffic jams, I guess, that we ended up in the middle of the jungle, because it was only like one way to get to Demoso, and people with humanitarian aid, or not humanitarian aid, just with food basically and water, they all had to take that route to bring that stuff to the villages, the remote villages. So it's not even possible during rain season to take that road because of the mud, but also because of the river that's in between. Like with the car, you can drive through the river when the water is low, but in the rainy season when it's high, you have to switch cars. Like you have to leave your car there and drive, let somebody else drive it back. Then you have to take, how do you call these? Like these ropes that you have to climb over the river and then go to the other side. So it's basically impossible to get there.
Yeah, that's chaos. And you were with the KNDF. For anyone that doesn't know, explain who they are, what they're doing.
Before the coup in 2021, there were civilians. Like you have this difference in eastern Myanmar between the ethnic armed groups that have been fighting for decennia long for their self-determination, and the groups that formed after the 2021 coup. And these are often like they consist of civilians. So it was whatever. Most of them are students, lots of young people. And they picked up weapons after the coup, and then they formed themselves. So the KNDF is one of these groups. So before the coup, they were civilians, but now they're fighting.
Right, and they're the groups that like went to the mountains to train with the already hardened guerrillas.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And the funny thing is, like, often a lot of them are Burmese. The main ethnicity in Myanmar is Burmese. They're mostly in the mainland. But yeah, after the coup, they went to the border areas to train with the ethnic armed groups, because they obviously had a lot of experience fighting the army, and they fight side by side now. And in the recent months, they have been cooperating more, like especially with the Operation 1027, which consisted of three different. Well, they were all ethnic groups, but it kind of inspired people in all different states, so the KNDF as well, to combine like firepower. So that's also what happened in Karenni State, and recently they took on the university in Loika, which was a massive accomplishment, because it's very difficult for these groups to maintain positions. Like the problem is they don't have the firepower to maintain them. Like they're guerrilla style, so they know how to get in, they know how to fight. but because they don't have the same artillery as the Burmese military have, like it's difficult for them to maintain it.
It's like an amalgamation of ethnic groups that have fought in the civil war that's been going on, like, you know, almost upward of 80 years now. But all of these factions were perhaps like not friendly before, right? But now they're like, right, they've all come together for the greater cause, if you like.
Kind of, yeah. It's a bit, when I was there in June, it was a bit different still, because there was at the time, there was little to no coordination between them. Like they often had problems, like when the KNDF was doing a mission that the Karenni army or the KNPLF, the Karenni National People's Liberation Front, like they have no idea what they're doing. So they often got in each other's way, which led to like a lot of problems. Like there was this one time, this mission, they were set out to do something. They got shot at by the other party because it was just so much confusion. So back then it was difficult. But yeah, as I said before, like since the start of the new operation, it actually showed like how strong they can be when they combine firepower. And they really think, or I mean, it really kind of shows that it can be a turning point. Like if they start working together instead of, you know, fighting side by side, but without clear communication, they actually have a chance to overthrow the junta.
Right. For the first time, it's actually looking like it might be possible, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was a bit skeptical, to be fair. And I think lots of people before as well, because, you know, it's like, it's such an asymmetrical warfare. Like they basically have nothing compared to the Burmese military. Like they have no means to shoot down a jet, which it was reported that they did. Like I'm not sure how they did it. But yeah, I mean, if you have the air force that the Burmese military has, and if you have the firepower, like heavy artillery, and the training also that the Burmese military have, like the rebel forces, they just don't have that. Like the trainings that the KNDF had, as well as other forces, I think, as the PDF or whatever. It's basically, you know, months of training, but they don't have the ammunition to actually practice shooting. Like the practice is done in the field. It's at the front line. So that's a big problem, and it caused a lot of deaths.
Mm. What were they like, the people you were with, the KNDF?
It was really funny. Like the first time I came there, so I was in the car and I drove to the base where I would be staying for the next 3 weeks. And I came there. It was about 2 kilometers from the active combat zone. And we drove in the entrance, and I saw like this tree with like a table underneath, and they were barbecuing, and it was like I think, like 15 to 25 people sitting next to the barbecue. One of them was playing guitar, like they were singing. So, and it was all people, I think, from, you know, like 16, 17 to 35. And I was a bit like, there's no way that these are the guys, you know, because they weren't wearing any uniforms. But yeah, it turned out that was the commander who was playing the guitar, and that was like the whole crew. So it's very, very young people. It's a lot of students because, you know, during the coup, it started at the universities. And the civil disobedience movement, it was a lot of like young nurses, other people from the universities, like teachers. Those were the first ones that you know, went to the protest, and they ended up going to the ethnic armed forces to train there. So it's a lot of young people, and they were very, like, how you say, I think humble is the right word to describe. It's a bit like, because I've reported from a lot of...
They weren't like hardened militants, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like they kind of are like into battle. They're hardened militants, but they don't like to brag, if you know what I mean. It's not like they come back from the battlefield and they're like, oh, look at what we did. Like we did this and this. It's very, how do you say? Yeah, I would say humble. I think it's also because, you know, they kind of lost hope that the rest of the world stopped caring about their problems, so they have nothing to prove to anyone. Yeah, it's just a bit like they're doing their thing. They want to fight their battle, and they don't have to, how do you say, they don't have to convince anyone for anything because they're doing everything themselves. They make their own weapons. They fight themselves. They have to find ways to smuggle weapons into the country. Like, there's no one helping them. So I think that, yeah, that contributes to that like attitude that they have.
You saw some of these homemade weapons or craft made, however you want to say it, including 3D printed stuff with the drones. Tell us about that. What was that like? How prevalent was it in the area where you are?
So at first, when I came there, I thought like because you saw the videos from the FGC9s in the pictures. So that was the thing that I was expecting to see. I was thinking that there would be a lot more 3D printed rifles at the front. But there really was not. I think it's mostly because in the beginning days after the coup, people made weapons out of anything. They had like bow and arrow. They found all these different ways to design weapons as fast as possible, and one of these ways was the 3D printer. So that's when, the J Stark's FGC9 was produced. But as soon as they found other ways to get more conventional rifles over the border, they started using that because 3D printed weapons, it's plastic, so it turned out that it's not very suitable for like the rough conditions at the front line. So it's better to use. Like, they now use, I think it's M16s that they use mostly. So yeah, I couldn't really find that one, but I did find the one of the guys. His name is 3D. His nickname. He was the guy that produced the FGC9s in the beginning, but he changed to other things because he found that it was not rifles that they needed, but it was different things they needed. And one of the things they desperately needed was drones. It's incredibly expensive to import it from China, from whatever, because you have to pay, how do you say, you have to pay money to get it over the border. It has to be smuggled. So it's better to just do everything yourselves because they don't have like the conventional chain of supply. So he started making the Liberator, MK1 in the beginning, which was an entirely homemade drone. And at first, it was just a couple of parts that were 3D printed. So, for example, the battery case and the frame was used. The frame was made with help of a 3D printer. But they made a second design, which is the Liberator MK2. And that one is for, I think, about 40% 3D printed. The wings are made of plastic, so it's incredibly light as well. And they've been using that a lot at the front lines. The next step for them, they said, was to make a suicide drone, but this is just more convenient because they can do attacks about like 10 times per day with one drone. And that has been proven very helpful because, the biggest thing is that they don't have anything from the air except for these drones, especially in Karenni State. Like in different states, it might be different. Like in Shan State, they have different artillery. But in Karenni State, the biggest problem that they had is that they were bombed continuously by all sorts of artillery, but they had nothing, to make the enemy fear the sky a bit the same as they did. So for them, the drone, like the MK or the Liberator MK2 was, it was extremely helpful.
Where did they have this 3D printing factory, if you like? Because imagining like somewhere to do it in the jungle just seems like it would be quite a problem, like quite a hard thing to do. Where was it?
So you don't have a lot of shelters. Like, for example, in places like Ukraine or whatever, you have always buildings you can hide in, like basements. In Myanmar, you only have like it's like not wooden houses, but from bamboo made. So the only thing you can do is like find a place to hide. But they found actually the best place, I think, in Karenni State where they could have a factory like that. which was a very deep cave into the mountain somewhere. Like it was a really difficult road getting there because you have to go over the mountains, and even though everything is remote, like that area was just completely like uh, off the track. And it was a very deep cave. It used to be like a sanctuary, or not a sanctuary, but like a small temple. There was like a Buddha statue standing there, and the Buddha statue was surrounded by these 3D printers. I think they had like 6 or 7, and that's where they made the drones, or no, not the drones, but that's where they made some part for the drones. They built stabilizers for mortars. They were working on a suicide vehicle they could use at the front lines. But as well as mines, like casings for mines. You know, it's very easy. You build an explosive, you put the casing of the mine with like spikes in the plastic on top of it, and that way you can make things more lethal. So yeah, the place was quite special. But the other place, the other base that they had, where they actually put the drone together, it was in a different place. I think it's maybe also because you want to spread these things. You don't want to have one base where everything is, but it's better to have like a couple places where you do it. Yeah, it was mental. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the thing is, like, even from that place, huh? It's like even like from the mountain, from like so there was this cave, and you could step outside, and he was on the mountain, and you could see Loika. So you could see like the occupied, or not the occupied areas, but you could see the like the active combat zone. You could see like smoke rising from the distance. So it was quite close, but it was such a safe place because it's a bit like you're like 30 meters underground. So even if it's a direct hit, you have like it can collapse, but you still have the safety.
Yeah. How do they get all that equipment up there?
By cars, they just drive. Yeah, and scooters as well, I think.
But how the fuck did they get 3D printed? Like, so they got to get like the ender, like the 3D printer all the way up there. They got to get generators. I imagine it sounds like a lot.
Well, the thing is, like, for the rainy season, yeah, they need generators. But in Myanmar, there's an awful lot of sun, so they use solar panels mostly to generate. But yeah, it's still it's pretty difficult. Like it's not as in Ukraine. Ukraine, you have electricity often, like not always, but you have infrastructure, which is you just don't really have that at these places. So it's a challenge for them. But yeah, they still pull it off because it's like for them it's necessary. Like they have to find these alternative ways of producing these things because otherwise there's nobody that's going to give it to them.
Yeah, ingenuity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did you see them using that like in any other way? Was it just weapons they were making, or parts for weapons, or were they using it for any other things?
No, it was just for weapons. Like they did make some stuff, because it's young guys. Like I think it's yeah. Again, it's all students. It's all people that were studying like IT or different things in Yangon, like before the coup. So most of them are Burmese. So they do like they fuck around a bit. They make like small like statues. They use the 3D printer as well for making like tags for necklaces. It was one way for them to get fundings. So their plan was to start producing these like engraved tags. And for soldiers, it's a good thing because you can put your blood group on there, you can put your name on there, whatever. But also, yeah. So he actually gave me one that said "Live free or die" because it's Jay Stark's motto, and people in Myanmar like
That's
for them,
crazy.
yeah, for them, but the whole like the words for them have more meaning than for anyone living in another country because they're actually experiencing it. Like live free or die. Like they're fighting for their freedom. So it's yeah, they can relate to that very well.
It's very immediate for them.
Very, very, yeah. because that's the thing. Like they were living under a military dictatorship since what, like 1962, and you had Aung San Suu Kyi, obviously, like since 2011, like in between. But even that, it was kind of like it was not really a democracy. So they really, like, it's all these generations that grew up without knowing what a democracy is. And like the funny thing is that they're really preparing the soldiers or preparing each other for what's going to happen when they win the war. They're very optimistic. They really, and like I think most people are, like, after the like the ongoing operation, but they have these, how do you say, like, these ideological training camps. So they teach people about, like, what a federal democracy is, so that everyone that's fighting, like, knows what they're fighting for, which is very interesting to me.
Popular Front is entirely grassroots and independent. Subscribe to our Patreon for hundreds of exclusive bonus episodes, extra video content, access to the Popular Front network, and much more. It keeps us moving forward and you get lots of exclusive content. Subscribe at patreon.com/popularfront. That's really interesting, and I think particularly that links into the solidarity you've seen with the YPG in Rojava, northeast Syria recently. If anyone doesn't know, basically the rebels put out the video first, or was it the Kurds?
I think it was the rebels first, yeah, and then the Kurds replied.
Right. So the Myanmar rebels put this, they put this cool video out where they're saying, kind of solidarity, like, they kind of nod to Rojava, saying, like, we share your struggle. And then the YPG and the YPJ made one back and said, yeah, like, we acknowledge that, we share your struggle. But the interesting thing there is it's not just like, it could be any random group. The YPG particularly has this democratic confederalism, as they call it, and I think, especially even when I was speaking to the Myanmar rebel lad that we had on, I can't remember his code name. I know his real name, but I don't want to say that. But anyway, he basically was saying something quite similar in terms of, like, yeah, we want a kind of confederation. We want to be able to rule each area, but we want to have our own democracy, not from the state. And I don't mean anarchy, like, not anarchism. It was something different, again, confederalism. Did you see people speak about that, like, day to day, or is it kind of just contained within the kind of educational theory camps?
To be fair, like, I think it's just them, like, probably it's a bit like, this is probably the first time that people are learning about what a federal democracy is and what it could be. But I think, to be honest, like, civilians, they're not really discussing it, because also, like, Karenni State, it's a bit of a different, it's not Burmese people living there, so I think they still feel more this drive for, like, self-determination than, for example, in other places. But they are thinking about, like, a possible solution, or for after the conflict. It's a bit like, right, like, what is, because now everything is shit, and they know the situation is not going to be perfect in the case that the military junta is defeated. But, like, what then? So it's a bit, you make the best of it, and I think most people realize that in order to give all these different ethnicities, like, a place in, like, a new Myanmar, like, this is what this is just the best way to do it. But yeah, to answer your question, like, it's just the soldiers, and especially, like, I can't speak for I don't think these camps are also being organized for the ethnic armed groups. So it's just PDF, KNDF, mostly that are having these camps. But it makes sense also because most of them are Burmese, and they have always been part of the majority of the country. So it's a bit of a different situation with that.
Interesting. Could create some conflict in the future, or could not. You were talking a little bit about the kind of threat from the air. I know you experienced quite a lot of that, obviously, from the junta when you were there. How bad was that? What was it like? Like, is it regular airstrikes? Tell us about it.
So I think for me, I compare it to Ukraine a bit, because that's where I spend most of my time. and it was very different than that. I think the biggest threat was the jets. They fly over every night, but the thing is, you never know what they're going to hit, because they might fly, from base to another base. They might like bomb somewhere in the south. They might, you just never know. And in terms of other stuff like the artillery, it's not so much. They used it when I was there after they hit the camp next to us with vacuum bombs from a jet. They used it afterwards because they were checking, at least that's what they were thinking. So they bombed the camp. I think about like 5-6 people died. There was lots of injuries. And then they saw the cars coming to pick up the injured people. They followed the cars, like the lights of the cars, like where they were going. And then they started to bomb us. Because I was sleeping at the stabilization point, like the base where I was staying at was also the nearest place to how you say, well, to treat people that are wounded. So they followed the cars, and then they started to strike us with, I think it was mortars, to be honest, because as I said, it was quite close, But that's not it's not standard. It's mostly the jets that are just like the biggest threat. And the biggest problem is that, in Myanmar, you don't have the safety of, a concrete shelter. You don't have that. It's a hole in the ground, which is covered by like wood. Then they put some sand sacks on tops, or sometimes even bags with soybeans or rice. It's like it's crazy actually, but yeah, they do that. So it's not safe at all. Like also the camp that was bombed, we went there a couple days after, and the shelters were just completely like, yeah, it was just done. Yeah, I think like a lot of the people there, they don't even go to the shelters when there's bombing. They say like, it's better to just run as fast as possible and just hope you won't get hit. Because you don't, there's no safety at all in the jungle.
Yeah. You were there when these a lot of these people were killed. There's some nurses there, medical. How ready are they for that? I know it's been a few years now of this. How are they kind of adapted to trying to do that in the jungle?
So it's like, as I said before, most of them are very young. So also the medics, extremely young. Like some of them were 18, some of them were like early 20s. But before they worked as nurses, for example, in the hospital in Yangon, but they never had to deal with trauma injuries like that. So for them, it was a bit of a switch. Like I remember this one girl, her name is Jojo, and she told me about the first time she had to not deal with trauma, but she had to care for someone that she knew, which was a friend of her. It was a soldier who came back from the front line. He got hit by artillery. He had like severe wounds in his chest, and she was kind of shocked because he it was a face that she knew, and he died like at the spot, while she was trying to like fix him. And it's very, very difficult mentally, to experience that, because it's just kids basically that are dragged into this horrific war. They never wanted this, but they have to. There's no other way. So yeah, she said like the first time she experienced that, you have to get over it, but then you get used to it because every day there's more shrapnel wounds, trauma, dead, like 18-year-olds that you have to wash, you have to prepare for their funerals. So it's the same as everywhere. You get used to war, you get used to blood, you get it becomes a very strange reality, but most people, they get used to it very well at some point.
And what kind of resources do they have out there for medical aid?
Well, not that much, to be honest. Like, there's one blast functioning, because I'm only now speaking about Karenni State. I do think, or I know that in the other states, also at the borders in the mountains, it's kind of the same situation, but because it's different countries that border them, it might be different. So there was one last functioning hospital in Karenni State. There was before the coup. There were 8. All of the other ones got bombed, so this was the last functioning one. Very tense situation, overcrowded. All the beds were full, and they only had one echo. Is that the right word? Echo?
Do you mean like the kind of thing the thing you would use for pregnancy, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So they only had one of them, but they didn't just use it for pregnancy.
Ultrasound.
Yeah, an ultrasound. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, the ultrasound. So they only had one of them, and it was donated as well. They only had one surgery room to perform surgeries in, and it was continuously busy. Because the borders are closed, so you can't just bring medical supplies over the border. I mean, it does happen, but you have to make a deal with the Thai border guards, so it's expensive as well. And then you also have to think, there's not so many NGOs operating in Myanmar, but also not so much on the border. I mean, there are, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as, for example, the support has been for Ukraine or to other places. So there's a lack of everything, basically. Yeah, there's lots of people that can do it. There's lots of surgeons. There's lots of people that are, qualified, but they don't really have the supplies for it. And especially then, the ultrasound and stuff like that, you need to trace the shrapnel and stuff like that. If you have 10 people coming in, you have only one one operation room. It's a bit like, yeah, what are you going to do? So it's a big problem there.
And they even bomb the funerals, right?
Yeah, man, it's fucking insane. Actually, it's really horrible. So the 5 people died at the camp. The one next to us that got bombed. Which was, by the way, it was retaliation, because the battalion that was on a mission back then, they killed, I think when they came back, they said they killed like 40 people, and they came back with all the weaponry and all stuff like that. And the moment they came back, or like half of the group went back to camp, like that exact moment it got bombed. So it was definitely retaliation. And I was speaking to the commander, and he actually felt kind of guilty, because he said, like, I was the one that was like, right, guys, you can go home. We don't need you anymore. Go rest. But yeah, then I guess there was a spy. There was, that's a big problem over there as well, just as it is, in any war, that there's a lot of people that are in contact with the Burmese military. So the moment they came back, somebody made a call. Camp got bombed. And then the next day, when the 5 people were being buried, we were at the funeral, and there was kids. There was, the relatives of the people that died saying their goodbyes. And at that moment, there was 2 jets coming. These are Russian jets, by the way. And they were making circles like over the whole area. So you saw children like running away, like diving into like small little, how do you say, like behind a hill, like behind a small hill, but basically anywhere people could take cover, people were taking cover. Also, like there's like, where are you going to hide? There's no shelter. So some people were sitting behind a mountain. I was sitting behind a mountain next to the commander of the battalion. And he was like, yeah, this is a safe place. And then I was thinking like, but what if the bomb like drops, in the valley? Like the shrapnel would like fly up. So there's not really a safe place to hide. But yeah, so the jets were circling around, and in the end they were bombing the cemetery on top. And luckily nobody was there yet. They only did some preparations, but there was no casualties. But after that, the soldiers and the people from the battalion, they decided to go on with the funeral with the close family members that wanted to stay. But yeah, everyone else had to leave, like all children as well. So it's a bit like, it's such a fucked up thing to do. It's a bit like you can only bury someone once. It's like the last thing you can do. And yeah, yeah, it's horrific.
Russian jets, is that just like left over from before?
Uh, no, I think it's leftover from before. I think they had them before 2021. Like, to be honest, I'm not sure. It's not that I know that there has been like new deals or something like that. Besides Russia, it's actually China that's one of the biggest suppliers of weaponry to the Burmese military.
When are you just like day to day hanging out with these rebels? How do they kind of keep their morale up? Because as you said at the start, the whole world kind of comparatively to other conflicts doesn't really give a shit about this situation, and it's an extraordinary kind of concept where all these young students go to the mountains and join an already kind of battle hardened guerrilla force, and then learn their own things, and then branch off, and they're all kind of under the same umbrella, all fighting the junta. It's really kind of unique in that sense, and yet still the world is not that interested. The junta up until recently seemed to be almost like immovable in terms of seeing the so-called international community kind of trying to do anything. How was it they kept their morale and kept fighting despite all of this?
To be honest, I think they don't give a shit anymore about what the world thinks and what the world does. Like, and I mean, they're right. Like, if you look at the recent operation, they've booked more success than ever before. So they can do it by themselves. Like, they know that they don't need the help from outside, and they got used to that. So, for me, it was extremely depressing being there. Like, and it was it felt very different than when I was in Ukraine, because a lot of people cared about that. People didn't feel like like left by themselves or whatsoever. But in Myanmar, like, I was the one who was like, oh, everyone is forgetting this, blah, blah. And they were just a bit like, yeah, it's just the way it is, like they weren't even that bothered by it, because, they just didn't expect anything else. And yeah, as I said before, like, they're doing it, they're doing it. Like, they build their own weapons. They are completely, yeah, how do you say, like, independent. They don't need stuff from anyone else, and still they're booking major advances. So I think that's how they keep their morale up, just by fighting, just by going step by step, meter by meter, just continuing until they have this federal democracy that they want. Um, yeah, to be honest, I think that's just it. Like, and of course, when dead soldiers are being brought in every day, it's some sort of people are sad, because it's their comrades that are dying in front of them. But it's also just a matter of getting used to that. You're in a war, you're used to the fact that people are dying. So yeah, I think you probably know that, like, they make a lot of music, they sing a lot. The guitar is like it's a very common thing to have for anyone. So I remember the commander, actually, his name is Maui, beautiful voice, and he was singing like every, or not every night, but like when he would come back from mission, he would come back, he would just sit by himself, he would, play the guitar and sing for like hours and hours. And sometimes people would sit with him or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of camaraderie as well.
Yeah. That's kind of similar to what the rebel lad Kabor that we spoke to. He was just like, you just get on with it. You know what I mean? It's like, this is life now. You just get on with it.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's literally, you just get on with it.
So you got this article coming out in issue 2 of our magazine, Popular Front magazine. It's called Myanmar with Love. Without going into the whole thing, maybe you can just explain to us about that, because I think that's a really great story.
Yeah, so when I was there, I met 2 medics. Her name was Jojo and his name was Kotai. And I actually didn't realize before that they were engaged, but I realized a couple of days after I've been there. So he was working in Yangon, and she was there as well. They were both working at the hospital, and he was the first one to join the armed resistance, and then she came afterwards. And yeah, it's a beautiful love story actually. Like they learn everything together. Like they came together into the war. He taught her how to how to deal with like trauma injuries, and it was such a beautiful thing, because they were talking about what their marriage or what their wedding would look like after um, after they won the war. So yeah, it's basically, the article is about the war in Myanmar. It's about the revolution through the eyes of Jojo and Kotai, who are fighting side by side, or not fighting side by side, but saving lives side by side.
Yeah, it's really excellent. The photos are incredible as well. That should be out January at the absolute latest. But yeah, it's looking really, really nice. I know it had a big effect on you when you were out there, essentially living with the rebels for 3 weeks. What is the main thing that you kind of took away from being with them?
I think the main thing is I talked about it before, but just how humble they are. Like, I was humble in how disciplined they are as well. So I stayed with them for 3 weeks. They woke up every morning at 6. They all had different jobs, like they were going out or whatsoever. But they were very, very disciplined. And yeah, the humbleness. It's for me, it was very special because when you work in the Middle East or you work in other countries, it's sometimes a bit like you're being ripped apart. Like, everyone wants something for you. Like, it's good sometimes. It's just a very different way of working. And in Myanmar, it was just a bit like, right, you're here, write whatever you want. But I was a bit like, it sometimes really felt like being a fly on the wall, because everyone's just doing their thing without noticing me too much. Nobody was bragging about anything. Everyone was just like, just go on with it, just do your thing. Just the only thing that mattered was, like, the victory. And they didn't care that much about, media attention or other things like that. And I just found that great. I just found that amazing to see.
It's really different. All right, Daphne, if people want to see your work, get in touch with you, so, where can I do that?
It's a bit dumb. I'm still not using Twitter. I really should, but I think the easiest way is just on Instagram. It's at Daphne Wesdorp.
Yeah, no, I think don't use Twitter. It's a fucking cesspit.
Yeah, exactly.
Wesdorp. All right, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, all right.
That was the Popular Front podcast. If you want more exclusive bonus episodes, extra video content, access to the Popular Front network, subscribe to patreon.com/popularfront. We're entirely independent and grassroots. Nobody owns us. Patreon keeps us going, as does our merchandise. You can get Popular Front apparel and accessories at popularfront.shop. You can also buy our various publications there, like the Popular Front magazine. We're censored on social media and streaming platforms, so please follow us and share our content. Watch our documentaries at youtube.com/popularfront. Follow us on Instagram at popular.front, Twitter at popularfront_. And for uncensored updates on the world at war, follow our Telegram at popularxfront. If you want to keep track of my other work, it's the same on all socials at Jake_Hanrahan. That's HANRAHAN. You can find all these links and more at popularfront.cc. The music in this episode was produced by Sam Black. Check him out at samblackpf.com or search Sam Black PF on Spotify. The intro music, though, is by Home. If you want to advertise with us, email jake@hanrahan.tv. Thank you to the Patreons on the credit tier. They are Onofrio Madogno, Thomas Sadowski, Pengu, Jessica, Peter Cherry, Lupe Calderon Garnica, Thomas Giuseppe, Jake Fuentes, Viola Forvel, Christian Bustamante, Daniel Verdin, Margosha, Rohan Irvin, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R, Evan Pank, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Benjamin Tupper, Siddhartha O, Damien, Cameron Collins, Scott Turnbull, Matthew Diffley, Claire, Liana, Robert, Sean, Cusinar 8, Christianovic, NTHG, Ethan Zwick, Peter Nybratton, Gabriel K, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, No Dogs No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Dallas Dunn, LD50 Seattle The Band, B, Rambo, Larson 8669, Ivan Julien, Diamond Steen, Michael O'Connor, Nicholas Butter, JD, James Kapinski, Jav, James Cully, Ethan, Fitz Madrid, Ed Coulthard, D. San, Mike Barone, Scott Hopton, Liam Williams, DZA, Giorgio Arani, The Vegan Straight Edge Global Cabal, Amy, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Caitlin Wicks, Michael, Neck, Freya Northman, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Bike Lane Bowser, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lockrin, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, Adam Bergsnyder, JL, Stephen Davila, Chad Walker, Peter McCormick from What Bitcoin Did, Christopher Martin, Ryan Sandercock, and Maurice Zumbull. Thank you all so much. Support us at patreon.com/popularfront.